Hello and welcome to Inside the Therapy Room. I'm your host, Sam Sellers. I'm a registered therapist, a wife and a fur mama, and I am passionate about breaking down the barriers and stigma attached to therapy. I want to begin by honouring the traditional custodians of the land we live and work on. Today, Naomi is on Yugara land and Sam is on Gundungurra land. We pay our respects to the elders past, present and emerging, for they hold the memories, the traditions and cultures of our First Nations people. We must always remember that the land below our feet is, was and always will be Aboriginal land. Today we're chatting to Naomi Hutchings, commonly known on social media as the Australian Sexologist. Naomi has been working in the wonderfully interesting field of human sexuality and relationships for over 17 years. She completed a Master's of Health Science in Sexual Health, a Bachelor of Arts degree majoring in Gender Studies and Politics, and is completing a postgraduate in counselling. She works completely online with people all over Australia and around the world. She has years of experience working with people from diverse backgrounds and is committed to understanding and acknowledging the way race, culture, ability, gender and sexuality intersect in people's lives. Naomi is working full-time in the sexual and relationships counselling space, where she works one-on-one with individuals, couples, thruples, families and other relationship structures. Her youngest client was just 6 and her oldest clients were a couple aged 89 and 90. Tune in to hear how Naomi found herself working within the world of sexology. We discuss what is and isn't involved in sex therapy. We explore the impact of social media and the broader society on the conversation around sex and what it is like inside her virtual therapy room. And as always, Naomi smashes a myth from the world of sexology. We hope you enjoy joining us inside the therapy room. Welcome, Naomi. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks, Sam. Thanks for having me.
Yes,
and
it's
hopefully
wonderful.
The puppies will stay quiet.
Yes, I know. I've also got
dogs.
a puppy on my lap, which this is the first podcast she's joined me in, so I'm hoping that she will be nice.
Fingers crossed. We have four dogs amongst us and hope they all stay quiet.
Who knows what will happen? Anything can happen with 4 dogs. Goodness. Thank you for joining me. I'm so excited for this episode. I have been, we had a little bit of a social media chat beforehand, but
yeah,
I have been a long-time follower of you on Instagram. I think most people will know you as the Australian Sexologist. And so today we are chatting about all things that fit that category of sex therapy, sexology, all of those fun topics.
Yeah.
What drew you to this line of work?
Well, I think probably the thing that always comes to mind when people ask me that question is I had an unplanned pregnancy when I was a Catholic schoolgirl. I was 16 and a half.
Yep.
And I had some interesting things happen throughout that. Things happen that I could probably talk about another time where, some interesting things happen of people's reactions to a teenager becoming pregnant. Anyway, so I had that baby and so I had like an adult child. But when I went, and back then you couldn't, like, if you left school, you had to wait until you could try to get into uni through something called the mature age entry.
Yes.
And mature age was 21.
Yep.
So I waited, and
not great for the ageism conversation at all, is it?
Yeah, that was interesting. Now I think there's much better ways people can, go in for a lot of reasons. Anyway, I was 21, went to uni, and I at that point just did it, like I started an arts degree, but I did, it was called gender studies then. Actually, women's studies for a while and then swapped. So it was called women's studies, but it was about gender as well. And then the politics. And I started doing a lot of like essays and things that were about, teenage parents and just different things like that. And that got me thinking about the lack of, I perceived it to be a lack of really comprehensive and inclusive sex ed. I'm like, the curriculum, what's going on, that kind of stuff. So I think that sort of started it. And then I was doing volunteer work at different places and ended up doing a lot of sex ed stuff. And I ended up being like a sex educator at a sexual health service. And yeah, so I kind of got very passionate about it very quickly, and then ended up, I did some training and stuff with the Sexual Health Service in South Australia. I ended up working there, running that course in the end, and I did a master's through University of New South Wales a long while ago now. I think that master's in sexual health is a little bit more tied up in the medical space now there. But so I think I just kind of realized that we were getting a lot of messages that weren't helpful, not true. And that became like, that's why I sort of went in that space.
Yeah. I love that. And I would love to say that I feel like that messaging that we get has gotten better, and it probably has to some degree.
Yeah,
but it is still really warped. There is still some really warped conversations. And like I said to you before we started recording, that I work with religious trauma, and purity culture is such a big part of that. That really narrow conservative view of sex and sexuality and modesty and purity, abstinence, and all of that is just
so unhelpful,
really toxic conversation. And people automatically think that the opposite of that is just like swingers parties and orgies, all of like, it's just like sexual chaos, when reality, we know that it's just not
that.
Like sexual authenticity and integrity and understanding. But I wish that that conversation was better than it is.
Oh, for sure. I'll be 49, I think, next week. And I got the messaging, and I know, again, this is what I mean. No matter who I talk to, everyone gets different stuff, even if you were growing up in Australia. Like, I speak to people all over the world, but so it's all very different, but it's not even the same in Australia. We don't have, each city doesn't have its own sort of, it'd be great if you had the one thing. But anyway, the messaging is different. So people will sometimes say, oh, you had some okay stuff. And but mine was very much back then was don't get married. Don't have sex until you're married, and certainly didn't address anyone who might be queer in the space, because that wasn't a thing either, right? No. So it's, and I still see pockets where I feel like it's all still there, and it feels like just when I was back at high school, which is sad. And then other times I get a bit more happy about the conversation that's happening.
There's those little glimmers of hope, that maybe something is changing, that maybe the conversation is going in a different direction. So for people who might not have any idea, what is sexology? What is sex therapy? What does that involve?
So really, like, sexology, and I get to say that I'm a sexologist, it's just that you study human sexuality at university. I suppose, like, people were studying, I did a bit of that, anthropology, so then you become an anthropologist or something. So, or I'd heard that people get called musicologists. I had no idea.
Oh, I did not know that.
No, they study music, and that's what they call it. So really you just get this ologist on the end. But I studied human sexuality at a university level. So that's one part, but I've done many random ongoing training all the time, just in any little part. So
So what might someone go to therapy for? Like, what might they see a sexologist for?
Oh, look, I see, it's so broad, but I will have things that I see regularly. And that will be usually like maybe a couple. I do see people who are in throuples. I think the biggest I've had was a quad, but mostly couples, or around managing their differences in maybe a few things there, maybe how often they each want sex, or how they get aroused, because some people are more spontaneous and some people are more responsive. So that's a very, very common thing that I see, lots and lots of that. And then, people who are struggling with erection issues, or not being able to orgasm, or, so they're kind of common things. And then I feel like the one about with the couples managing the differences is always big. But now I also see a lot of people who are wanting to open their relationship who previously haven't. But then also sexuality, so just their attraction, so wanting to work through who they're attracted to, and then also gender. So I do see a lot of people who are working through that as well. And also like sexual pain comes up a lot. So particularly those with vaginas. So I see a lot of vaginismus, or just sexual pain, and trying to manage that.
I often work with a lot of couples also, and it is one of the common things that comes up, even for couples just seeking I guess, traditional therapy.
Totally. Yeah.
Is that mismatched
Mm-hmm.
desire level or mismatched expectations even around
Yes.
what somebody needs or wants
Mm-hmm.
in that department.
And that's why I say I try not, like, I don't know, I sometimes hate using the word normal, because I feel like we always think that there is a certain thing that to make it normal, we're putting it against something else or comparing it. But I do think like that is, I feel like I want to normalize the fact that I actually don't think that, like, I know it becomes an issue, but if we knew that this is a very, why do we even think that two human beings, if it's two, would actually want, like, they're horny at the same time, they want this, like, it's such a strange thing, whereas we totally understand that one of you might be hungry and the other one isn't, one's a sleepy person and they prefer to lay in the mornings or whatever, like, but this, again, because of all the unrealistic expectations, this is what we see all the time. Imagine if you were taught that it's okay, this is a very common thing.
Absolutely. And the amount of couples that I see that just don't have any conversations about it. I go, how often do you actually talk about sex? Not just have sex, but talk about it. And it's so much rarer than you would want it to be. And you sort of go, well, how are you supposed to know what the other person wants, needs, desires, what their expectations are?
Yes.
You don't talk about it.
Absolutely. And again, there's obviously many reasons why, but also I think people just have this idea it's natural.
Absolutely.
Like it's just going to flow and you don't need a conversation because that just should just happen.
Yeah.
Still also not helpful and not true.
Absolutely. And, you know, I see that happen a lot for those who get married to have sex, particularly in the church and things like that. And they have this perception, because there is no sex education before that, you don't talk about it, that it is just going to be some magical wedding night. And in reality, they get there and they have no idea what to do with each other's body, because they have no idea what they're looking at or what to do with it.
And wedding days can be very exhausting. And I think if you haven't, and again, I suppose what you're really talking to there is that they probably, their idea or definition of sex is P in the V, penis in the vagina. So that is like, there is so much like terror for some people, or just this, they're panicking, or they've got all these ideas that it ends up, absolutely being an awful time.
Yes, absolutely. Move the goalposts. I tell my couples all the time, we need to move the goalposts. Sex incorporates so much more than just penetration and intercourse. And, you know, it's
a very
so much
helpful way to redefine your idea of what sex is, because, then it can be helpful for everybody. Yeah,
absolutely. I'm thinking about, you know, and I did mention this to you before, people who are watching Netflix series like Sex, Love and Goop, and, you know, all of those sorts of things that show, I guess, ways to get in touch with, you know, sexuality and intimacy with your partner and things like that. But there is a difference in different types of sexology and things like that. And so I guess, what is sexology not?
Yeah, well, for me, I suppose we certainly, I am a member of the Society of Sexologists, and that's just a space you can join. But I know that they have an overarching thing around sort of no touch. So I think sometimes people, I do remember once when I was doing face-to-face in Adelaide, this lovely, well, at first I made an assumption. I just assumed they were a couple because they walked in and I hadn't heard anything. I hadn't seen the pre-stuff, because now most people fill a form out and tell me a little bit, but they just came in. And so I made an assumption they were coming in together as a couple. They're actually cousins, because she had come in to see me and she was so scared that I was going to get her to take her clothes off. And I was like, no, we keep our clothes on in here. I can talk about all this stuff with So yes, I think some people do think that that's what I'm going to do, and I'm going to massage them. And I mean, I know that's a thing, because I've had some clients tell me they went off for what they call yoni massages. I'm like, no, I don't do that. I certainly talk in sometimes like detail about what you're doing, because we just, for whatever we're having a discussion about, but no, there's no touching. And, you know, now, because I'm always online, I'm like, sure, like as long as you've got clothes on, I don't care if you're in your pajamas, grab a cup of tea and talk to me. Because sometimes people are like, oh, I'm having a bad day. And I'm like, I don't care, get on, it's okay, grab a cup of tea, sit in bed and we'll talk. But no, your clothes are on. And mine are too.
Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah.
And I think, it probably, it would be a very real and valid fear for some people
For
if they
sure.
don't understand what they're actually going to.
Well, then I'm going to make them sit there and do some sort of sexual couple thing in
Yes.
front of me. No, that's not what happens either. They've
Yeah.
definitely workshops for that, but that's not me.
Absolutely. And I think, it is sort of important for people to make that distinguish between what is, somatic sexology, which is about the body and like that, and does involve touch. Sexology where it is not.
No, we don't do that. Yeah.
So hopefully that will put some people's minds at ease.
I hope so. Yes.
I
mean, if that's what you're looking for, go looking for that, and they'll
absolutely
specify that on their websites. But yeah, if you're worried, just know that that's usually not what's going on. They might, And I'm not a sex worker, so sometimes people think that as well. So I try to say that's separate as well. So I'm not going to be having sex with you. I'll talk about sex, but we're not going to be having sex.
Yeah.
Ever.
What is it like for the person coming in having to talk about something that is probably never been talked about with somebody else?
Yeah, look, I can, it's funny, when I first went fully online, I was a bit worried about how, when you would notice looking at people and worried that, you can sort of pick up when people are nervous, but I actually find it's actually brilliant because we're so close, I can see. So yes, I can tell some people are sweating. They just got to really, you can tell they're nervous, but I actually do this whole thing at the beginning. I say some things about myself. I acknowledge, I say, listen, I've been in this field for 20 years. So I am sometimes probably appear very blasé because this is all I do, but I acknowledge all of that and acknowledge that I understand you may be very nervous. And then some people go, no, I'm fine. Or others like, yes. And so I just say, look, I'm going to do my very best to help you feel comfortable, but just know I do this all the time and I really am comfy. So I hope I can do that. But people are nervous. They've sometimes they'll do things like see other people. So they're going to psychologists, psychiatrists, whatever, but then come to me just for the sex part. It's like they cannot talk to their other therapist about it, or maybe their therapist hasn't brought it up, which is interesting because that's one of the things I used to do, train professionals. And I would say, bring it up, ask the question. And they're like, no. And I'm like, ask it. And then they can shut you down and say, I don't want to talk about it, or they'll go, yes. So anyway, it's still not happening. Or people will go, oh, go see Naomi. Because they don't want to, they're worried that they can't talk about it. I suppose they think you have to be like this expert or sex expert, which is like, you can still have a discussion without having formal training, I think, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think anybody who is working with couples needs to have that comfortability.
Check it in,
to be able to have that conversation. I will always tell any couple that I'm working with, to share to the point that they are comfortable, but I am totally okay with what they want to tell me. Essentially.
Absolutely.
But it is it's an important part of a relationship, and it can't be avoided. It needs to be spoken about. So, it doesn't mean that you have to then continue working on that with them. That's what there are people like you refer to if it is something that is much more, health-based or pain-based or something that you don't have training in. But the conversation needs to be had. Otherwise you're missing a part of the puzzle.
Absolutely. And I suppose people, when they see me, they've obviously searched for me and know that that's kind of my area of specialty area, I suppose. But we often do end up talking about other things too, because they think it's about the sex, and sometimes it's not about the sex. It's something else we need to work on, and we work through that. Sometimes it really is actually specific to sex, but other times there's this whole relationship thing that unfolds, or something, or just their own stuff.
Actually, that's a really great point, which is, there probably is other things that you're talking about. There would be trauma,
for sure.
There would be grief, there would be other things. It's not just, it's not just body parts and sex.
No, lots of body stuff. We're unpacking fat phobia, also race, gender, like all of these lines. I suppose that's kind of that sort of feminist perspective. Often people think that, we have the idea that feminist stuff is about sitting there talking about hating men. No, what we're doing is just talking about the way that societal stuff in different layers impacts. So yes, we talk about culture, gender, patriarchy, like all the things that can actually impact their sexual relationship. And sometimes people, I think you just get so caught up in what you're feeling, you don't realize, oh yeah, there was that. I was just shaming myself. That was slut shaming. Where did that come from? And we unpack that. So we definitely do lots of that, how the media impacts them, how they grew up. what messages they got. If they're religious, what was what was said about sex for them. So layers and layers of that.
Yeah.
Well.
And I would imagine that there would have been a lot of conversations when there are, high profile situations in the media, like,
yes,
particular sexual assault trials and things like that are bringing up a lot of stuff for people internally that might, remind them of a situation that they went through, or even just, oh goodness, I just think, like, my wife tells me all the time, just don't look at the comments, like, just don't. But I still always look at the comments.
They're buyer.
I still have to look at the comments.
I know.
And then afterwards I go, why did I look at the comments? Like, because you just see, well, what was she wearing? Like, maybe, like, and there's all of these comments that just make you angry.
Absolutely
furious at the way that society still views sex and sexuality and the way women dress and sex work and things like that. So I would imagine that there would even be conversations around how some of these things are spoken about in the media.
Absolutely. And it's interesting you said about, like, even sex work. I find a lot of sex workers come to me, maybe they've just seen something or heard me on the radio or something, and they obviously feel like, thankfully, I've realized, they've got a non-judgmental space with me. So sometimes they come just because they've got their own stuff, but not necessarily at all about being a sex worker. It's just other stuff that they feel comfortable with me because they can say and just be open. But we definitely do. And unfortunately, I suppose my line of work, but statistic wise, I do see a lot of survivors of sexual assault and even, wonderfully intelligent people who, know that there's, we're getting better at pushing back and not self-blaming and all that. They'll still, once we unpack a bit, you find that a lot still. They'll still say something to me and I'm always like interjecting, and saying, wait, what did you just say? And then they sometimes don't even realize they've said it. And I go, did you hear what you just said? And, you can tell that they said they're okay, but actually, no, they blame themselves for whatever reason, some of the stuff you just said. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you find that, we've had a conversation before about social media in general, but do you find that you see social media trends come up in your room with people?
I mean, there's certainly, I'm sure you see this, there is a lot of self-diagnosis stuff going on and words thrown around that I haven't heard as much as I do now, like every second person saying someone's a narcissist. Now, I'm not saying that, and again, I just want to be very clear, I'm not a psychologist, but I know that there aren't as many narcissists. No. Some people are shitty and they're just not good people, or their behavior is crappy. That gets thrown around. My mother's, so those words, or just buzzwords, even like, I suppose I'm thinking of like even in the ADHD space, which has been great for people to remove stigma and stuff. But even some of the words, the buzzwords that are coming around ADHD aren't even actually like, again, and I suppose this is interesting, like in the DSM, and I don't know, there's lots of, I've got feelings about the DSM anyway, about that, right? Yeah. But the fact that it's not even there, but they're seen as something, so I just think a lot of, like codependency, like that word always gets thrown around. And I'm like, hang on a minute, can we just unpack that? What does that even mean really? So I'm often just saying, why? Where did we get that from? And so yes, if there's stuff, that's in there, they'll bring it in, like these big words, like that, buzzwords, I suppose is what I'm saying, is that you hear and then they'll start talking about it, which I never used to hear as much.
What is it like for a sexologist on social media? Because I would imagine there are, I'm not concerned that my content is going to get banned or hidden, or people are going to, sometimes with the religious trauma posts I put up, I'm thinking, goodness, I can get some conservative Christians decide to rail in on that.
Yes.
But I don't tend to have, Instagram's algorithm ban posts and things like that because of the word sex or things like that. What is it like?
Yeah, I've had that happen. And I know we went through a phase. Look, my page has gotten very like still, I suppose is the right word. I've been on that since 2013 and I haven't ventured into TikTok or everything just because I just can't. I feel like I'm just overwhelmed, and I'm one of the people who grew up without it. So I know what it's like without it. But so I haven't, been as active as usual, but I definitely, there was a time where people even now are doing it. Some of the pages that have continued to grow, and the younger sexologists around the world they're not even writing the word sex now. They use a hashtag because there was stuff, but I definitely did. Like, I get really angry because like nipples and things at one point, you know, like, or birth. At one point we all signed, like there was a petition and we thankfully got that. We won that, but it was a while back. Like I couldn't even put, like I was putting birthing sort of stuff up and they were banning that again, that stopped. But yeah, definitely I can tell people will say things to me like, I haven't seen any of your posts for a while. So yes, I mean, a lot of the stuff I ended up doing because I was just using like just because of myself, how I like to hear stuff, I would get comedic sort of, so some comedy, some funny tweet, and then I would then take that and use it with comedy to make a post about a particular thing. So so that probably stopped so many images that I was using. But yeah, I definitely think that there have been people banned, and you know, some people that I used to speak to a lot in other countries, sex workers and stuff, like they were getting their whole things shut down. And so definitely it's difficult.
Absolutely. It's like the censorship is just extreme. Like it's and things that you wouldn't think are being censored are like, you know, people with larger bodies, you know, people, you know, who,
and the nipple thing.
Yes, it's so bizarre.
So how do you guess Instagram? How do you know what gender someone's nipple is? Like, it's weird.
Yes.
But yeah, all of that stuff.
I think
the free the nipple thing went around a while back when that happened.
I don't actually remember who it might have been. I think it might have been Ellie. I think she runs Comfortable in My Skin. And I think she actually did a post where she posted photos of people's nipples without their bodies.
Yes, and then said, guess
like,
the gender coding.
Try and tell me, and guess, whose is who. Because it is such a bizarre thing to sort of to censor and go, you know what? Like, you walk down the beach, you're going to see a bunch of them just on male bodies.
Right.
You know, so it's
it's bizarre. I think you and I were having a conversation. It is. And then I think we were just having a conversation before we started recording about like how I'd somehow stumbled upon some pretty horrific stuff of what's going on in the world right now. And I'm like, how is that there? And of course, you know, and then a nipple gets banned. You know, I don't understand. And it's frustrating. If you do go and do a whole post and people get their accounts taken down, and and
it's hard to sort of help society move, I guess, in a sexually progressive direction when the social media outlets where people are sharing this type of content are so behind
absolutely
game. It makes that a really difficult conversation to try and be a part of.
Absolutely. Like, I've had a picture of a penis that was drawn as well, and it was just talking about like, I think this was years ago, but it was like flaccid and something. I can't remember what we were talking about, but I remember they just took it off. Like, it wasn't even it was a drawing, and it was an educational post. It was not, anyway, and vulvas, I've had that happen where I've done something and did this whole big thing and then it got taken down, and it's frustrating.
Social media world. It's I feel like it's one of those spaces where you just really never know what you're going to get. It's just such a mixed bag.
Yeah. And I suppose I'm kind of weirdly having I don't know, I have been having discussions with you and many other people about how I feel about the space. And so hence why I've never gone into the other ones, because I feel like I'm just stuck. I gave up Facebook years ago, but I struggle with it. Like, you can see how it can be absolutely wonderful, but I also, I don't know, I knew a time when I didn't have that. And so it's kind of like, especially in this space, because there are so many, you know, the therapists on there and all of that. And I know that for some people who can't maybe get to therapy, that it's access stuff, financial, whatever. And a little bit from there can be helpful, but I just think there's not a lot of room for nuance, and can be quite binary, and that's how most things are not like that. The world we live in, the grey, right? It's not that.
Absolutely.
So if you say, you might know this, you write a post about something and people lose their mind when they're like, you didn't specifically talk about their exact thing. So that is very exhausting, having to do that, where you literally make no money. Because I, as I said to you, have refused to take money for a number of things because I will not go against my values, and I really, really don't. All I think about is my potential clients, past clients, whatever, I'm like, there's no way I'm going to say this because I'm selling out, and I'm not going to sell out to make money and make my page bigger and pretend that these things they're trying to get me to sell work, because they don't.
Yeah.
So there's that too.
I think it's, we've talked about those products, and there's also like, like webinars and courses that just give the impression that, you can fix all of those things in like this 2-hour course, or like this short window of time. And I think anybody who knows anything about the human complexities, knows that it is not that simple. No. It is just it is so much more complex than just doing a quick course or a quick webinar and it being super generalized. The courses and things like that are wonderful, and they have their place. Someone said yes. So they have their place. But the reality is that they're general and they're not personalized, and they are never going to be an everything for somebody to be able to, work through those issues. You are never going to be able to, pop a pill and it be okay. I have talk about medication even, from that standpoint, and you sort of go, medication can't be a fix at all. Yes, there are benefits of things, but you can't pop a pill and think that everything is going to suddenly be okay. Sexual desire and libido.
Certainly for libido pills anyway. There's no way. That's why I refuse. I'm like, if you can tell me, please, why you think these are going to work, show me how. I've been in this area for a long time and I still haven't found one that works. And that's the thing. But it's sad because people go out and buy that and then still think, what's wrong with me?
Absolutely. I've had people who have, particularly couples who have said, I've been told to get these libido pills, and I'm just like, oh, it's such a nuanced conversation to go like, that's just like not going to cut it. It's not, you're just, all it is going to do is going to cycle back and make you feel like you are somehow not worthy, or not, is there something wrong with you because these pills that are suddenly supposed to be working for everybody else is not working. So what's wrong with me? And we
might be a placebo effect of like some kind of like feeling a bit energetic, but that's not going to deal with that, won't address any of the other stuff that's going in the bedroom or wherever you're having sex, right? That's not so
absolutely.
Yeah. And even the vibrators, right? They're great for lots of different things. But I'm saying if there's other stuff going on, that also isn't. So I think a lot of people think I speak, like Cosmo and Claire, all the things I grew up with, like how to give the best blowjob and how to do like that is, I actually don't do a lot of that. It's funny, like there are sexual spaces or on Instagram that where people do that. It is way beyond that. We do a lot of, yes, I get specific sometimes around things, but it's way more than that. Like it's not that. Yeah.
And I think that's probably a really great segue into what is it like in a session with you? What is it like in a sex therapy session?
Well, first off, I hope that they feel comfortable with me. And I always acknowledge that I've been on the other end of couples therapy and things like that. So I know it can be weird. I always at the front say to people, if you get to the end of this and I happen to say, let's come back again, and you don't feel like you vibe, click, whatever word you want to use with me, I'm like, don't do it. Because I think, yes, it's very important that people we see have the credentials they say they have. But I think particularly here in this space, that you want to feel like I get you in some way. We don't have to agree on everything, but that's a big part. But I do say, I hope that you just feel comfy with me. I get called a sexpert a lot, and I try to say to people, I don't know everything about sex because nobody does. Like,
Yeah.
So trying to kind of just do that and then give them a bit of this is how we're going to work. And then, I ask them, sometimes they've written in the little pre-thing a bit. Sometimes people write an essay in there. Sometimes people write nothing or one word. And we unpack that and go from there. So it could end up being that I do a bit of like psychosexual education where I'm showing images of vulvas, not my own. It's a drawing, and I'm just talking about that, or I've got my little clitoris thing, the 3D thing. So I may do. I probably do a bit of that actually, just sort of running through those things and unpacking myths and stuff. But I think, I don't know, personally, I feel like people do feel pretty comfortable with me. Some of them have obviously, that's why I put videos on my website, because I like people to know and hear. You can Google and hear me. So if you think I'm not your person, then you don't come. But I think, yeah, I try to be exactly like this. Like, it's just a thing. Don't think I know more than you kind of thing. And yes, I mean, I do forget, probably because I've been in this area for so long. I do have lots of information I can share, but a lot of it's just trying to unpack things, make them feel comfortable. And yeah, I do sometimes hear things that they've probably never told anyone. And I will say, look, I've heard lots. You're not going to shock me. I honestly don't get shocked, like, really, in this space anyway.
Yeah. And it's probably important for people to know that, in this space, you can get as detailed as you feel comfortable, because
absolutely,
sometimes the
is in the detail. Yeah. I do warn people that I say, I'm probably going to ask you questions that maybe nobody's never ever asked you before, and you don't have to answer them, obviously, but sometimes you'll see, and they can usually see where I'm going. It's because like I said, I interject sometimes, just trying to, when they're talking, because they've said something and they've just brushed over it. I go, hang on, what did you say? And then I'm often clarifying, what do you mean by sex? And then I go, and then they say this. And so there's all this kind of back and forth a bit about just going, where did that idea come from? And, so we're unpacking that. So, yeah, and they do. Sometimes they get very detailed because they need to, and they want to say, this is what happened. So we might be saying, try your side, or, if you're talking about orgasms. But, other times it's just that unpacking, realizing that they've got some shame there they didn't know. And, we're talking about the layers of what, where did that come from, kind of thing.
Yeah. Do you find that it is more difficult for certain genders to seek sex therapy?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose we know that cis men tend to sort of, what is that? I remember when I worked in a sexual health space, the doctors used to say there that, like, men will just turn up when they're like dragging their legs broken, really like take a long time, which I know for many reasons, right? Because of patriarchy, which impacts them too. So sometimes I think, but I certainly get lots of men solo as well, and they sometimes are very open with me once we start talking, like I think sometimes they're not maybe talking to a partner or whatever, or they've just got their stuff and they've never ever unpacked it before. And obviously once we start talking, I hope they're feeling comfy, and then they just let it out, and they'll say things like, I have never ever told anybody that, and they're 60, 70 years old and they've never said it.
Yeah. Actually, another great point, which is, sexology would not be for young people, or, I would imagine you would see, people.
Yeah, all ages. I think my oldest clients were 89 and 90, and they were living in a space where they must have made a comment to one of the workers who they called a taxi. This is when I was doing face-to-face in Adelaide. And they came, and we saw each other 3 times, and then they wrote me a card, like in same, like, beautiful cursive writing, like my grandmother. But and we unpacked some stuff, and then they wrote me this beautiful card to say they'd had sex, and I was like so happy for them. So I did used to do, so every now and then I get a young person who's perhaps attending like a family, so maybe it's the parent and we're talking about them just working through being trans or something like that. But I tend to, obviously now, because people, it's private, so people are paying, usually they're sort of 20 something, but I get a huge range of ages. But I have worked in other areas. I used to do like sex education with parents and caregivers and stuff, so I think the youngest client I had was 5 or 6. Because
I was thinking, the opposite end of the age spectrum is still needed, because
absolutely
there are conversations around consent, and
particularly
queer sex education that you are not getting in school. I mean, to be quite honest, I don't even remember the sex education I got in school, and if there was any, it wasn't very good, because I don't remember it. And certainly nothing that would open the conversation for anything that was outside a heteronormative picture. So that sort of world still needs to be talked about in a in an age appropriate way for people who are often, I think, forgotten in that conversation as well.
Absolutely.
Or, shield the children, protect the children. And I sort of go, well, actually, some of these conversations are
We'll
going
do
to
that.
do that. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Because the abstinence only sort of space, we know that studies have all shown it doesn't do it. In fact, it's increased teen pregnancies and all of that sort of stuff. Whereas we know if they've had a more comprehensive, sex education, they will often delay. So in spaces where sex, countries where sex is very much talked about and open, they have a delay. They're delaying first. And again, I don't like using the term virginity and lose virginity. I think that's got a whole lot of crappy context. So, their first sexual debut with another person is later than other places. And that makes sense because often you're talking to them and then they're like curious because people get scared to think that young people are horny and have feelings and all of that. But they often make better decisions or they'll delay it. And, which is great. Like they'll turn up and go somewhere together and get some contraception or something. They'll make a lot of good decisions. I
think the notion that if we don't talk about it, it shields them needs to go in the garbage because, and not just with sex, with pretty
all
much
the things,
anything, because the less you talk
minimization
about,
stuff,
alcohol, drugs, or porn or whatever it is, the less you talk about it, the more curious they are, the more they are going to find that information out from other sources. And sometimes those sources are not ideal or not education based. And so
then they keep it all inside, or they just take things like, even when you mentioned porn, like people are horrified. They're like, no, we need to not talk about that. No, you need a porn literacy. Everybody needs to be, just like media literacy, so you can critique what you see, because we don't know. People have access to it now all the time. So if they're not talking to you and they see something, at least if you've had some like conversation before around, that's porn world, cool, and that's real people having sex, but there, it's just like Instagram, there's filters, there's things, it's not real. Then there's real sex. Let's talk about that, the feelings and the things you have to do there. So if we don't, they've got no framework to look at that and and just think they'll just think it's real, like the whole thing, because it is naked people. But if you haven't had a chat about it, and just their uncomfortability and all of that, I think if you make space for that, give them, they raise sexually intelligent young people, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. I remember saying to a mum that didn't want to have that conversation with her teenage son. She was a single mum. And I remember having that conversation with her going, she already knows that he's watching porn. And it's like, if you're not having that conversation with him, what stops him from thinking that this is the reality, that this is exactly what sex looks like? If this is his only form of sex education, what is he learning from that?
Exactly. And you don't have to watch porn. I would say to parents, you don't have to watch porn to talk about it. So if you're worried that you're going to tell them that you watch porn or whatever, I'm like, no, you don't have to drink alcohol to have a conversation with your kids about that too. So just talking about, hey, I know there's stuff everywhere. If you ever see anything and it makes you feel uncomfortable, talk to me. Or if you really want to get into it, say, what do you think that was happening here in some of the stuff you're seeing? What's happening to the women? Like, what's going on? And you can have a really good conversation about a whole bunch of things by doing that,
Absolutely. And I think, we have so much more understanding, particularly for the younger generation, that, the necessity to know the correct terms for your body is just vital. A colleague and I would run protective behaviors in schools, and just the vast majority of children who don't know the correct terms for their body parts. And you obviously get that silly playfulness with kids because that's their kids.
Exactly.
But that should never deter you.
No, it's part of it. Expect it. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
I work with adults and they laugh their heads off too. So it's
absolutely.
I love little ones. When I used to do it, they would ask amazing questions, and I just love it. But that's right. I think that's what people think. They're like, you're telling little kids how to have sex. No, the sex education we're talking about starts from the get-go, and it could be just naming body parts, talking about asking about I just need to change a nappy, or I need to do this, or we're gonna start having showing that we ask and respect their bodies. There's many ways to do that. And it's not like they're not that people just take it way.
Absolutely. And I think that conversation and narrative is starting to slowly change, and people are starting to see that this is not a sex thing, it's a safety thing, and that this actually might protect your children by them knowing the correct terms of their body, by knowing that what is safe and unsafe touch, what is wanted and unwanted touch, how do they tell the difference between that, and moving away from, that's not sexualizing our children, that's protecting and arming them with skills and safety mechanisms to keep themselves safe.
And then I suppose talking about masturbation, and I'm obviously, I suppose I sometimes probably do appear blasé, but I'm like, well, if your kid's sitting at the table and they're rubbing their vulva or penis, we just say, hey, okay, that might feel good, but we just, like, we don't fart or pick our nose at the table. Can you go in your room? I think even if you're uncomfortable, like, just do that. Send them the message that, oh, pleasure yourself's okay, but like, we just don't do it here. Like,
we don't do it at the dining table.
Exactly. That's how I sort of put it. I'm like, and I know people get uncomfortable because they're still dealing with their own stuff. But it's like, you can fake it, fake that, sit and just do it, because what ends up happening is I see the people who, one thing's, stuck in their head, they got busted, and I say that, somebody's walked in and they were masturbating or whatever, and then they got everything went pear-shaped, they got blasted, whatever, and then all they remember is that, like, that starts the shame, rather than just going, hey, that's just something you do in your bedroom or private time or whatever.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the bigger deal that's made out of it, the bigger deal it's going to have in their internal world, and just that Q-shaped spiral that will just continue the older they get. And then they will be the parent who is doing the exact same thing to their child. 20 or 30 years later. So
and it's amazing how long they carry that, I'm talking to them as adults, and then they'll tell me stories like that, and they're crying about it and just feeling awful. Or like where they've children have had some sexual play with another person or whoever's there, which people freak out when I say this, but usually children will do this with whoever's around, which is whether it's a sibling or a cousin, if they're an only child, like, that's what they do. If they're going to do it, and often you're putting your adult head on you're interpreting that in a very different way. It's not an uncommon thing for children to get curious and play with whomever they have access to. So like, parents are often, have freaked out about that. So we just talk about that. This is actually not uncommon at all. It's about just a bit of curiosity. And then, often though, the people talking to me have had something like that happen, and then they've never let it, they're like, what's wrong with me? When I was 5, I kissed this person, we did this. I'm like, And so we're unpacking that. Of course, I'm checking in to make sure that it wasn't something where someone did, have a bit more power over them or whatever. Quite often it's just whoever, like, oh, I once kissed my brother, and I'm like, and they're like 5 or 6, and I'm like, okay. And then they're like, yeah, we just tried something because we saw, and I try to explain it feels weird because we know that we wouldn't do that now.
Oh, of course.
But often when you're that age, you're not. You don't know that stuff. It's just, you're just there. You're doing things, I mean, again, there's often things that aren't okay, but quite often it's just that. But they've carried it this whole time and then blurted something out to me, and they're like, is there something wrong with me? I'm like, no. So all of that.
And it does tend to, it spirals into something that it's not as well. It just, spirals out of control. And then all of a sudden, what was something that was just born out of imagination and curiosity and maybe just replicating something that they saw on
honestly
or on a TV
or playing
show.
like Mum and Dad
or watching Mum and Dad, exactly, and so it just spirals into
this whole big thing, because they put stuff like especially if it's with a sibling, which again it's often is, because they're who you're around, and it's opportunistic stuff in the way that they're just, we're in the bath and I'm looking at yours, that kind of stuff. But they have made this whole thing of shame, and and so once we unpack that, talking about that is not an uncommon behavior, and I always obviously checking in to make sure they didn't feel coerced, and that's a different feeling. Even again though, sometimes they're still very, very young, so we're talking about people not having, if they've had no sex ed, knowing you're not supposed to do this, but or if someone's busted them, the hell that happened after that. Some people have told me the most horrific things, where they were never to see that friend again, and all stuff like horrible things, and they carried that right into wherever they are now, you know.
Absolutely. The extreme reaction causes extreme shame, as like they mirror one another. You know, I remember, you know, hearing a story that like a parent had literally taken the door off the kid's bedroom after being caught masturbating because that was disgusting. Like you're inciting, you know, and there was obviously religious connotations. You're inciting, you know, evil spirits, and you know, you're like, I've seen, oh my goodness, things about like when particularly people who have a vulva who are self-pleasuring, that's the devil doing that. That you're inciting the devil doing that. And so like I remember this story vividly, that they literally took the door off the hinges and put it in the garage so that this, you know, this poor young person had no privacy, no sense of self-autonomy, and you know, the shame spiral that started, that didn't just affect their sex life. I think it's important to note that this doesn't just affect your sex life, that's going to affect your relationships, your body image, the way that you view yourself in the world, the way you interact with other people, your social connections, you know, all sorts of different things. That it's not just, okay, you got caught doing that, that's now you know, you may not do that for the rest of your life. It's much more complex and nuanced than that.
Absolutely.
So
interrupts a nice healthy sexual development when that happens.
Absolutely. So let's get to tends to be my favorite part of every episode, which is hearing what myth people want to smash about the world.
Okay, so I'm just going to say this. I mean, there's a few, I've got plenty, but you know, I feel like this one, because I see it so often, it's particularly because mostly it's cis women who come to see me who say this the most, that they think they have low, and I'm saying that in quotations, low libido, or did you see that? I was just going to say, there's been an update on Zoom, and when you use your hand, I've had fireworks, which funnily enough, in the middle of having a session with someone about orgasm, it went off, and then balloons, and luckily everybody's okay. And I keep trying to turn it off. It's weird because there's a reaction thing on the bottom that you can do hands and stuff, but so that's a new one. I've had fireworks, balloons, and now confetti.
Goodness. For people who are listening, please jump on YouTube and find that section. Like, my goodness.
Yeah, and it's an update, so I don't know if there's a fault there, because I've tried 3 times to turn it off, but it was so weird, but very weird when I was in the middle of doing it. But funnily that it somehow went on about orgasm and the couple were laughing hilariously. But so what I wanted to say is that one of the things I see the most is particularly women, cis women will come to me and they say they're broken, right? Because they've got low or no libido. And what I want to say is, I think that is not the case. I think that what's broken is the societal messaging around sexuality, and that there are many ways arousal shows up, and that I don't even know what I even think about, you know, the word libido. I just think, you know, there are some people make decisions to have sex based on a lot of things. So what I'm saying is, you're not broken, and we shouldn't be pathologizing this like low libidos. I think everything gets medicalized and as if something's wrong, you know.
I hate pathologizing things in general. I tend to sort of go, you know, I don't think anybody is broken. You know, we're not a toy that requires repair or needs fixing. But
and particularly for women, I'm sorry, but I feel like them not feeling like sex. Look, there's obviously so many reasons, but I often say they're valid. It's a valid response to not feel like sex with what you just told me is going on in your life. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I just got saying that's normal.
And to think that it is not connected to something else.
Yeah.
Like there is always a connection there.
And you know what? Some people just don't want a lot of sex or don't even think about it at all. And why does that have to be? It's okay. We are very diverse. We're similar in lots of ways, but humans are also diverse. So it makes sense that there's some humans who never think about it.
Absolutely. And yes, I think, you know, I will tell my couples, you know what? If you want to schedule sex, schedule sex.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
if that's
I
what you
hate the
need to
word.
do.
It's the word, right? There's
Yeah, but it brings up that connotation that it's not wanted, or that,
yeah.
you know, or we're not prioritizing it.
And I think you just said the word prioritizing, because if you change the word
Yeah.
schedule and you're prioritizing sex, and you want to, right? If you want to, that's a good thing.
Yes, absolutely. I go, well, actually, by scheduling it, by putting it, you know,
As
in
a thing to do. Yeah.
it is prioritizing it. That's the essence of what you are doing. You are going, this is important to us. We both want it.
Yep.
It is, you know,
Yeah.
we want to make sure that it doesn't get left aside. It's something that we are both, you know, value
Wanting to
and
do.
prioritize.
Yeah.
Scheduling it essentially
sense
is
in this,
at its essence
right?
prioritizing it.
That's exactly what
Yeah.
I just feel like, I mean, seriously, with all the stuff that's going on, I'm surprised anyone's having sex, to be honest.
I
But
know.
do you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
I feel like it, yeah. And I think people get so worried about the fact they're not having sex, that becomes almost like a break, and they're, you know, and it's like trying to let go of, this is a very common thing, especially so in monogamous relationships.
Yeah.
So it's only the two people that they're, you know, made a deal to be sexual with, kind of thing. So, you know, and the longer term relationship, there's all stuff there that is it's expected. Like, it's like not making it such a thing, there's something wrong, you know, like.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, it is important to sort of go, like you said, if you don't want to have sex and you don't have a reason, that's okay. You don't need a reason. No is perfectly valid as a full sentence.
Totally.
Like
Absolutely.
you don't need to have a long-winded story to tell your partner, your spouse, about why you don't want to be sexually intimate with them. You just say no.
And what you just said is what I spend a lot of time doing, because they, for some reason, they'll say no to something else, but this, because there's so much stuff tied up with the sexual stuff, right?
Yeah.
So that's exactly right, you know. Yeah.
And there might be a reason, and you aren't comfortable sharing that or whatever it is, but, you know, no is perfectly valid. And, you know, I've even said to a couple who, one of the people in the relationship went, you know, I was just tired. I was just tired. And
that's it. It's like, not like I don't want to be with you. It's not that I don't think you're sexy. You're not a good, no, I'm literally tired.
But their partner was like, yeah, but like, shouldn't this overpower that tiredness?
Yeah.
And we're
See,
like,
that's the difference in,
oh my God,
right? And that's where I talk about, you're one of those humans who does have an overpowering sense, and they can just overcome everything, even their tiredness, and get sexy, right? Off they go. But they're with someone, no, that tiredness override, and they can't get it. So they don't understand because they can. And that's that thing of having that conversation about the way arousal is. And a lot of people, that is a big break. They're like, are you kidding? I just want to go to sleep. I am not doing any exercise right now, you know?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think,
but they don't understand because they clearly don't experience that.
Yes. Yeah. And so it just spirals into something that doesn't need to be. The partner wanting sex feels unwanted, unloved, rejected.
Which feels awful.
And then the other person feels like there's something wrong with them. Like, why can't I just flick a switch
like that
and turn it on? Why can't I do that? You know, maybe maybe I'm not attracted to them, and it just sort of
goes right out
into something that it just doesn't need to be, when in reality it's just, you know,
differences.
You are two different people. Somebody's tired. Let's go to sleep.
Yeah. Find
That's
a different time.
Yeah. Like, so
yes, that's pretty much a lot of what my work is that stuff, I feel.
And I think, you know, if anything, people get out of this conversation that it's not always just about sex, going to a sex therapist.
For sure.
Bigger than that. It's it's connected to a multitude of different things, and it's not just going there talking about the actual act of having sex, or talking about foreplay or things like that. You know, a parent can go to a sex therapist and talk about how do I educate my kid about consent.
Sometimes I have mum come because their kids come out, whether it's trans, queer, whatever, and we just have a space for unpacking what that feels like.
It is a much more diverse picture than perhaps what social media, perhaps what, TV shows and documentaries
Yeah,
give it credit for, which is that it's
I'm
just
not going to tell you to
always
steam
about
your vagina and all that.
yes. Oh my gosh. That just sounds like the most mortifying experience, to
Right.
be quite
Yeah.
fair. But it's just so much more than just like sex and body
Yeah,
parts and pleasure
absolutely.
and things like that. It is, relationships and social connections and consent and parenting and
Yeah, all of it.
all sorts of different things. And so I think it is an ever evolving conversation.
Yes, it is. And then, whatever, keep going. Yeah.
It is a slowly evolving conversation, but, I hope that at least, more doors start to open.
Yeah. Yeah. And people
for
can feel
people.
less like broken and
Yes.
do what they need to do in their specific relationship if they're in one.
Yeah.
Relationships, like not worry about what like some of those podcasters are saying. You better have sex 3 times a week or your whole relationship is over. Don't listen to that unless both of you want sex 3 times a week. Cool, then go with that.
In which case, go for it. Sounds exhausting, but go for it.
Yeah, do whatever. Yeah, exactly. It's like, no, don't worry about it. But they do. Some people really take that stuff and like think about okay, we've got to do this. I'm like, no, you don't, unless you really want to.
Yes, exactly. And there is a lot of information that gets pumped into your, feeds, your social media, your news outlets. There is a lot.
Some people
there.
who've never studied human sexuality or relationships are even, and they're like saying all this stuff like it's gospel.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's just, it's easy to understand how people don't know what to believe. They don't know what is what. And so go and find somebody and have an actual conversation as opposed to reading and make sure that those people that you're having a conversation with actually know what they're talking about, that they have information, that they're not just someone who, did a 3-month like coaching course and thinks that they're a sexuality
sex coach. Yeah.
So yes. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you. Always a good conversation.
Wonderful.
My favorite topic.
I've loved having conversations with everybody.
Awesome.
It's been great.
Right. Thanks for having me.
Hopefully.
And the puppy stayed quiet.
Yes, I know. Mine got a little restless.
Mine moved, but they've moved, but they're still in the room. Yeah.
We had success.
We did. No puppies barking.
Which is good because dogs are unpredictable.
They are.
Yes.
Yeah.
Success. I rate that as a success.
That's a success. They all went through it. Yep.
Absolutely. Thanks, Naomi.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
We hope you enjoyed joining us inside the therapy room. Thanks for listening.